Tom. Our meeting to talk about wildlife farms and estates, I think we did speak more about succession than we did about that at the time, but that was a lovely to spend some time with you. And David, you won't know this, but my daughter came and did an intern with you at Houghton this year. So she's studying history of art at Trinity in Cambridge, and she said, would I negotiate a pay rise? So I thought I'd bring it up while I got the opportunity. So thank you for that kind introduction, Tom, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today, speaking on the topic of 30 by 30 and wildlife farms and estates, to discuss turning ambition into investable and estate scale action. So how do we turn the next 5 years into legacy? Biodiversity gains that also strengthen brand, license to operate, and provide optionality for your estates. DEFRA owns the policy, and our job at Natural England is to make it workable, rigorous, and fit for purpose. I see wildlife farms and estates as the bridge, an independent science-based accreditation that helps you evidence purpose, protection, and management, the exact ingredients that 30 by 30 will test for. And if you're already doing the right things, wildlife farms and estates makes them visible, verifiable, and valuable. And if you're just starting out, it helps provide a clear roadmap and a plan for your journey ahead. Now, I've got 30 minutes. I think it feels like too long, so I'm going to try and keep you with me. But at 25 minutes, I might have to start trying to keep you. I mean, there's a lot of information here. When I do a talk, I always like to talk about Natural England. I don't think people understand enough about who we are. So we are the government's science and evidence-based advisor for nature. We want to see nature thrive for people and planet. And we don't talk about enough about our values. We are ambitious, inclusive, collaborative, so actively engaging, and we act with integrity. We cannot do anything without partners and partnership working. That's a big part of what we do, hence why I'm pleased to be here today. We're thinking for the long term, and so our work is very much about working for the benefit of both present and future generations. And this idea of values, I went to Chatsworth earlier this year. It was great to see. They had 3 there that really strung out to me. I mean, it was always improving, decency, and inclusivity. And when you went and spoke to their people, whether it was the guy doing the woodland work or the guy in the farm shop, this always improving, and this idea that we've got the train set, it's up to us now to make it work. I went to see Tom. He talked about go see something your father had spoken about. Get out there and go and see. And I think you said your good people want you to go and see them, and your bad people don't want you to go and see them. So a good reason to go and see them. So it's important, these values. And we've got a new strategy coming up. We'll be announcing a new Natural England strategy in the next month or 2. And we are we're very much now about a new mindset. We've been nature conservation for a long time, but we're now in a different stage of recovery, and that takes a different gear set. And so we look to our values because these don't change, but this is who we are. I work in a team, the Greener Farming and Fisheries team. I wanted to share a few slides by way of context, just to highlight how far we've come and the challenging environment we're all working within. This was 2020, the final day of January when we got Brexit done and we left the EU. And it was September the same year that we first started to hear the concept of 30 by 30, with the government officially committing to recovering 30% of land and sea by 2030. According to the maths at that time, we were at 26%, counting all protected landscapes. And so we only had to achieve another 4%. No big deal, really, and especially with 10 years to do that. So all sounded quite doable. But a lot has happened over the last 5 years. We had COVID, a worldwide lockdown, with many falling ill. And then we had supply chains came under enormous pressure to deliver. We saw empty shelves, and at one point we were more worried about toilet paper than food. We then had a war, and then the knock-on effects that this had on input costs, especially energy. And then we got smashed with inflation and interest rate rises. And then we saw the strain of coping with some of the hottest weather on records. And then the wettest winter on record. And then the final straw with changes to the inheritance tax. Only it wasn't the final straw, with rises in living wages, national insurance contributions, and then we saw budgetary pressures coming on ELM schemes, and then we saw the Donald and trade and tariffs. And so it's not surprising that the current pressure on businesses is sky high. There's a lot more stuff going on since that, and it can keep going. If we just go and look at what signals we've had from government. So what have they been telling us over the last few years? We've seen a direction of travel from the government for some time now, signposting its ambitions and its intentions. So back in 2018, we saw the 25-year environmental plan. This was the first time we saw a strategy and a long-term vision for the future to improve our air, soils and water, to increase biodiversity and tackle climate change. And then in September 2020 at the UN Biodiversity Summit, G7 leaders and among 60 heads of state endorsed the Leaders' Pledge for Nature to halt the reverse of biodiversity loss by 2030. And the UK Prime Minister, for the first time, committing domestically to 30 by 30 by pledging to protect 30% of UK land and sea by 2030. In 2021, some of you will remember COP21, where again we showed global leadership, setting further targets for clean energy transition and nature recovery. And as George Eustace said, setting an example for the rest of the world to follow. And it was in 2021 when we had the introduction of the Environmental Act. So this brought the legal framework which effectively translated that 25-year vision into enforceable law. It established legally binding targets and timelines for vital areas like air quality, water, biodiversity and waste. And it established a set of environmental principles that must be considered by all ministers to ensure environmental improvement. I keep seeing people in the crowd that I don't recognise. And it set up the OEP, the Office for Environmental Protection, to hold the government accountable, to mark the government's homework, if you like. And as part of their mandate, a requirement for the government to update their plan every 5 years. And so in 2023, after the initial 25-year plan was established, we saw the government's update to the plan with EIP 23, the Environmental Improvement Plan. And so we first had the strategy, that 25-year plan, then we saw the legal framework in 2021 with the Environmental Act, and now we see the Environmental Improvement Plan 2023, which is essentially the delivery mechanism to make this all happen. There are 10 key goals, each with their own specific deadlines and targets. The apex goal is thriving plants and wildlife, and a key target is 30 by 30. This commits us to protect 30% of land and sea for nature by 2030. And so what did the OEP think? They've marked the government's homework. Well, they had a year to respond. And in 2024, their report highlighted gaps in delivery. And it challenged the government to act urgently and decisively to deliver on its environmental commitments, warning that the window for opportunity was closing fast. The government's response earlier this year, they get a year to respond, was an acknowledgement that they need a need for accelerated action and a commitment to a full revision of EIP 23 to integrate stronger delivery mechanisms, and we will shortly see a new and improved EIP 25 coming out. And I guess, as well as oversight of the ELM schemes, part of my role is also oversight of the farming rules, farming and water pollution regulatory reforms. We will see a white paper out later this year, which will look at a consolidation of the farming rules for water, NVZs and SAFO, to try and make some sense of what have we got already and how can we deal with some of this going forwards. So anyway, try and keep back on target, on subject. On the previous slide, we saw the apex target, to halt the decline in species abundance. And this is the extrapolation, if you like. If we carry on what we're doing, we're going to end up in that bottom right-hand corner. So at the moment, nature is still in decline, and it's not even flatlining yet. If we continue on our current course uncorrected, we end up with further biodiversity decline. So 30 by 30 is about halting that decline. And we really want to be shifting the dial back towards nature recovery, where biodiversity is valued, restored, and wisely used. And our new strategy will pick up on that sort of idea and mindset change of going from conservation to nature recovery. In this report, the 5 statutory nature agencies in the UK, that's the 4 devolved nations, plus the JNCC, the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, have come together to identify how we can succeed in achieving our commitments, along with ensuring nature recovery plays its critical role in achieving net zero. And here we can see this is something we're all working on together, all devolved administrations, coordinated by the JNCC and reporting on behalf of the UK as a whole. 30 by 30 is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reverse biodiversity loss, tackle climate change, and create a resilient environment for future generations. However, it requires urgency, partnerships, and accountability if we are to deliver real, long-lasting benefits for both nature and people. Next one. So what counts towards 30 by 30? There's 2 types of land that can be counted towards this goal. Firstly, protected sites, and I've listed a range there. David mentioned Ramsar, which is on there. And then secondly, we have OECMs, and here's the opportunity. So that's other effective area-based conservation measures, places that aren't designated but are governed and managed to deliver positive and sustained in situ conservation outcomes. The government is developing a formal recognition mechanism for this. So OECM doesn't add new obligations, so it's not about designation by the back door. It recognizes what you already do, and it recognizes where sufficient protection and management already exist. Your 30 by 30 area can be the whole estate, a defined part, or as part of a cluster with neighbours. Last October, we saw the first 30 by 30 official updated criteria detailing what would be counted, with a focus on 3 tests: purpose, long-term protection, and effective management. Land that counts for 30 by 30 must meet all 3 criteria. And in 2020, when the UK first committed to protect 30% of land by 2030, we had that 26% of England sitting within protected landscapes and sites, leaving only that 4% to secure. Now, with added criteria or added clarity from these criteria, and now needing to meet all 3 of the tests, the numbers have changed. And it was decided that protected landscapes could not be counted in their entirety, only the bits of them that met the criteria. So for example, in the case of SSSIs, only units in favourable or unfavourable recovering condition contribute to 30 by 30. We now have a new number and a new problem. It's only 7.1% of land in England qualifying. However, from new challenges come new opportunities, meaning that there's real headroom for high quality contributions from estates. And so just to clarify, that 7.1% figure, it's a recognition of the areas that are already protected and delivering outcomes for nature against the three criteria. That said, we still see protected landscapes as really important places to be accelerating the delivery. Detailed guidance in the form of a 30 by 30 action plan is being developed, with pilots already underway to standardise assessment and reporting. A bit more on those three criteria for 30 by 30. So first, the purpose. In situ conservation must be explicit, not incidental. This means the land has to be deliberately and specifically managed for nature recovery. It's not enough for it just to be incidentally a nice green area. The land's core purpose or management objective has to be about conserving species, habitats, and biodiversity. In other words, conservation isn't just a side effect of something else. It's the main intentional goal on that land. Second, protection. Outcomes are locked in for 20 plus years through designation, conservation covenants, or long-term management commitments. This is about protection for the long haul, meaning land has to have some sort of safeguard or legal mechanism in place to ensure that conservation value isn't just a temporary thing. In other words, you need to show the area will stay protected over time so the important biodiversity on that land isn't at risk of being lost or damaged by future changes to inland use. So essentially, it's about ensuring there's a commitment or some formal protection so that the conservation efforts are stable and enduring. And then thirdly, the final one is management. So it's having a plan that shows improvement over time. It's not just good enough to designate the land and then to protect it. You also need to show that there's active and effective management in place. That means having a clear plan, good governance, and some form of monitoring so that you can track how well you're doing over time. It's about making sure you're not just designating the land and leaving it, but actively managing it and showing progress towards nature recovery outcomes. An eligible 30 by 30 area can be the whole estate, part of the estate, or a cluster across multiple holdings, as long as the assessed areas meet the three tests and excludes any intensive or incompatible uses. So where do estates fit? Well, you've got the scale, you've got continuity, governance, and the ability to stitch mosaics and corridors together to really make a difference. And protected landscapes are the backbone in spirit, but only the sub-areas that meet all three tests will actually count. So the boundary line is not enough. The eligible area can be a whole holding, part of it, or a cluster with neighbours, but you must meet all three criteria. The policy remains voluntary, so we should align tools and incentives to make contributing the rational choice. I think there is a great opportunity for estate owners to take a leadership role within land that they control, being 30 by 30 leaders at a landscape level, engaging and involving their tenants, tenant farmers and neighbours, setting a high bar, and really helping galvanise outcomes across an area. And I know that's easier said than done. I was speaking to James last night, and again, David mentioned about maize being grown in the area and the issues that can cause. But that's now starting to reduce. So those conversations are really important. Just as another aside and as a piece of context here, I just wanted to share a slide about the National Estate for Nature as an additional context. So some of you may already be involved in this. It's bringing together major landowners collectively owning around 10% of England's land to support the delivery of the Terrestrial Environmental Act and nature recovery objectives, including 30 by 30. And that's through action on members' own estates. The membership is largely public sector landowners, that's largely government departments and agencies, but it does include public utilities, ENGOs, and some large private estates. By working collectively, the group's membership have enormous potential to make meaningful environmental improvements at scale. By discussing the challenges and opportunities together, the group aims to develop more consistent and effective approaches to nature recovery across its diverse land holdings. This collaborative mindset represents a significant shift from the traditional siloed approach to land management. The Landowners Group isn't just about good intentions. DEFRA will actively encourage members to make positive environmental improvements and regularly review progress across agreed actions and help set the standard for collective responsibility. We're proposing a tiered or stage metric which works for organisations who do not primarily manage their land for nature. So that could be the MOD. Their priority would be racing around with tanks, not nature. So it's finding a way to bring that in, and how can we make improvements. But it goes right across the board to landowners who are already achieving those 30 by 30 targets. Wildlife farms and estates, it's independent and science-based, and you've got level 1, and I think we've got some level 2 awards today, looking at independently auditing governance, baselines, monitoring, and integrating land use and biodiversity outcomes. Wildlife farms and estates already maps closely to the 3 criteria, so that's purpose, protection, and management. So one evidence set serves for brand, finance decisions, and 30 by 30 recognition. Delivering peer leadership and raising credibility with investors, partners, and communities. I just wanted to mention about TNFD. You may or may not have or already be aware of this, but at the National Estate for Nature, there's been a lot of discussion around TNFD. So that's the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Bit of a mouthful. It provides a market-led framework for organisations to identify, manage, and disclose their dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities, all related to nature. It's interesting, as hundreds of companies and financial institutions have publicly committed to adopt TNFD reporting. The list is updated monthly and includes a rising share of the world's largest banks and asset managers. We could expect your banks, buyers, and partners to start requesting TNFD-style data. In practice, we could soon see it being used by lenders and insurers to potentially assess for credit and underwriting risks, so such as flood, soil, water, biodiversity liabilities, or utilised to help set covenants or potentially price capital on estates. We might expect to see requests for site-specific risk and mitigation and evidence, such as habitat creation, water status, invasive species control, and even wildfire risk planning. So, I mean, also for investors and buyers, they'll be using this to compare nature performance across estates and land portfolios and help allocate capital to those with credible governance, long-term protection, and measurable outcomes. So think of this as an eligibility for blended finance, BNG and habitat units, peat and carbon markets, and potential water stewardship deals. Promise there's just 2 slides left. We're getting there now. So who does what? With 30 by 30, DEFRA are very much setting the delivery of the strategy and the OECM mechanism and that 30 by 30 action plan, and then to integrate with ELM and BNG. So there's one coherent path from ambition to outcomes. Natural England support DEFRA with policy, delivery advice, and implementation, ensuring it's workable, rigorous, and fit for purpose. Estates can choose candidate areas, secure the protection, commission baselines, and monitor. With wildlife farms and estates acting almost as an accelerator, one independent audit and evidence pack that serves for reputation, investment, and assessment. Around the risks, I've just put down there risks, but when it comes to the independence of any third-party accreditation, does it stand up to scrutiny? Is it truly independent? Who and how and when is that conducted? Building that necessary trust is important to allow for a certain amount of marking your own homework and earning that autonomy to work alongside existing systems. And then policing. We were talking over breakfast this morning, but policing of any third-party scheme, how it's managed and maintained to the highest of standards to maintain that sort of integrity across the membership. So my final slide, I promise. Your legacy, your way. I mean, I've written down here, it feels like good business. And to quote somebody here, he's in front of me, as Edward Barnston's Nuffield reminds us, a modern estate thrives on that triple bottom line of people, planet, profit, baselining natural capital, locking in long-term plans and running enterprises that balance biodiversity with sustainable returns and community value. Your words, not mine, but I mean, this sounds like sensible stuff. There are so many multiple benefits to what you're doing. I think it acts as a license to operate, so having independent, measurable outcomes with long-term protections can help diffuse objections and smooth out planning issues. Set up correctly, regulators will see a low-risk and trusted operator, and local partners lean in. This is exactly the earned autonomy and trusted partnerships we've seen encouraged by the Corrie Review, and something we're actively exploring with partners, and it would be good to explore this further with you. Benefiting brand visitors and a magnet for talent. I mean, having a credible stewardship label can lift reputation, visitor spend, attracting partners, and also helping that internal recruitment and retaining managers, rangers, colleagues. Being ready, finance ready, public, private, with baselines, protection, and monitoring in place, you're best placed and eligible for ELM and BNG, and well positioned for conversations with private markets, those looking for BNG units, habitat and wetland creation, carbon and peat, and water stewardship. This is also about delivering flexibility at a portfolio level, so you can zone the estate, creating production cores, nature income parcels, and visitor assets, and maintain the freedom to rebalance as markets, weather, and family priorities change. I think it helps scale up or de-risk when needed, so you could join forces with neighbours to form a collective and counted area, bigger, better, 30 by 30 area, so that sort of idea of connectivity and scale, or ring-fence projects in SPVs to manage governance, liability, and exit options. So professional advice might suggest you set up a special purpose vehicle, lease 40 hectares from the estate, secure a conservation covenant, sell the BNG units under contract, service a loan for revenue, but almost keeping it separate. And then flexibility to future-proof without over-designating. So having OECM-ready evidence lets you be counted for 30 by 30 outside formal designation. So ensuring the land you select is meeting all the three criteria, purpose, protection, management, all while preserving management flexibility. And then finally, resilience, succession, and value uplift. So nature income streams and work that boosts resilience within water, woodlands, and soil capital can all successfully be used to hedge commodity and climate risk. Having a verified stewardship plan can help underpin valuations at refinance and be used as evidence for any partial sale and as a useful tool to establish vision and direction of travel if built into generational transition and successional plans. So clarifying the long-term ambition for nature on estates. Thank you for the invitation to speak. For me, the next steps are around alignment, establishing a clear DEFRA group view on how wildlife farms and estates meets the 30 by 30 criteria, and I look forward to supporting you on this. Thank you for listening.